The steps we are taking today are historic. They will open up a range of new opportunities for women in the armed forces. They also constitute a vital part of our effort to ensure the readiness and effectiveness of our military forces.
It's got to do with trying to have the most effective force for the military, and if we have better qualified women than men when the assignments come up, then we would have the most effective force if those women go above the men behind them. And that's really the issue here.
Hi, I'm Master Sergeant Jim Langdon.
And I'm Staff Sergeant Chris Beckwith. Welcome to Air Force Television News.
The military services removed a long-standing barrier that previously kept women from combat-related specialties. For the Air Force specifically, that means women can now compete for assignments in combat aircraft. During an April 28th press conference, the military chiefs and Secretary of Defense said the result means a much larger pool of talent.
You know, the women in the Air Force, 15% of the Air Force, are my responsibility, just like the other 85%. And I am delighted that we've opened up full opportunity to all of our people, men, women, whatever. Nobody ever told me I couldn't be Chief of Staff because my eyes were brown or for any other reason. So now we've told these women that the sky is not a limit on them. They can go as high in the Air Force as they can. So as far as the issue of fairness to women, the system we had was always an unfair one. I said so repeatedly. I never defended it on the grounds that it was fairness. I talked about other issues. But the period of talking about those other issues is over. We have a decision made by our National Command Authority, and we will proceed, and we're going to do it better than anybody.
Although women are now getting the opportunity to prove their ability in combat aviation, Senior Airman Jim Cunningham reports it's been a long time coming.
In World Wars I and II, women's roles in warfare were mostly restricted to flight nurses and clerical positions. But when America's manpower shortage became acute in the first 6 months of World War II, resistance to women serving in the military weakened. Highly qualified women pilots were recruited to ferry combat aircraft in the States, freeing men for needed combat duties overseas. The Women's Air Force Service Pilots, or WASPs, was organized in August 1943. When the WASPs disbanded at the end of 1944, they had flown 77 types of aircraft, more than 60 million duty miles, and proved that American women were willing to risk their lives in wartime flying assignments. Ironically, it wasn't until 1977 that the Air Force graduated its first group of female pilots, which brought mixed reaction from WASP members.
So it irritated me just a wee bit that the news media didn't get around to admitting that the WASP were indeed first.
Because of the 1956 combat exclusion law, women were still prohibited from being assigned to aircraft that were in combat missions or involved in combat operations behind enemy lines. Modern warfare, with its use of high-tech weapons and surveillance systems, has made distinctions between frontline and other positions almost irrelevant in terms of physical danger. 3,800 women were deployed in support of Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm, where some died and others were taken prisoners of war. This captured the attention of the nation. Today, there are 289 pilots and 115 navigators who are women.
There's always limits placed on you no matter where you go, I think, in the corporate world or anywhere. And now those limits are going to be based on our own ability, and that's going to be a welcome change.
Senior Airman Jim Cunningham, Air Force News.
To mark the lifting of the exclusion, General McPeak introduced the first 3 women combat candidates to the media. As you'll notice, the pilots bring an impressive list of qualifications to the fighter world.
As a result of these actions, we've identified several women who will soon begin training to fly combat aircraft. I would like to introduce 3 of them. The first is Lieutenant Jeannie Flynn. Some of you may already know her story. She was a distinguished ROTC graduate from the University of Texas, has a master's degree in aeronautical engineering from Stanford University. She graduated #1 in her pilot training class at Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas, last December. We asked her at that time what aircraft she wanted to fly. Her choice, the F-15, our newest frontline combat fighter. The rules at the time precluded such a choice, but we kept an eye on her. I'm proud to announce that Lieutenant Flynn will now be our first woman combat pilot. She will enter fighter lead-in training at Holloman Air Force Base immediately, followed by the advanced F-15E course at Luke Air Force Base. Upon completion of that training, she will be assigned to one of our F-15E operational units. Also here today are Captains Martha McSally and Sharon Pressler. A distinguished graduate of the Air Force Academy with a master's degree from Harvard University, Captain McSally is presently an instructor pilot at Laughlin Air Force Base, Texas. Captain Sharon Pressler is a C-21 pilot with the 457th Airlift Squadron here at Andrews. Sharon received her commission through ROTC and entered the Air Force in 1986. She spent the first 3 years of her flying career as a EC-135 navigator. She completed pilot training in April of 1992, so she's one of the relatively few aviators we have in the Air Force who holds both ratings. Captain Pressler will enter fighter lead-in training later this year, Captain McSally shortly thereafter.
Women were first integrated into the regular Air Force back in 1948. Since then, over 97% of Air Force specialties were open to them.
But the outcome wasn't reached without discussion. Special commissions and studies determined what, if any, limits should be drawn.
General McPeak admitted during the discussion phase he was a bit hesitant about sending women into combat.
We had a discussion period in which my views were asked, and I gave my honest opinion. If I hadn't, I think the Secretary should have fired me. Now the Secretary has made a decision, and it's my job to implement that decision as well as I can, and if I don't do that, he should fire me for that. So the discussion period's over. We're in the mode now of carrying this out in the best possible way, and we will do that.
Are you comfortable with the decision you have to carry out?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with it. I had a full opportunity to state my view. The Secretary made a decision. So I'm comfortable with it, and there's always a small chance that I was wrong.
Combat pilots are not chosen, they volunteer for their aircraft assignments. General McPeak says it's not a question of male versus female, it's a determination of best qualified.
There are special problems that spring from the physiological differences between men and women. I don't want to ignore them, but I don't want to exaggerate them either. We have women today flying trainers and other aircraft that have this same kind of difficulty. I mean, you got McSally pulling 7Gs every day in a T-38 and lots of other women instructors like that. So from my investigation and look at this problem, I know of no reason that has popped up that convinces us that we can't make this work and work very well.
Military scientists are conducting research to determine a woman pilot's physical capabilities. Staff Sergeant Tony Hurst reports from Brooks Air Force Base, Texas.
Are women physically capable of flying combat fighter aircraft? Armstrong Laboratory is conducting female G-force tolerance research to find out.
All people have a problem in a maneuvering airplane because blood tends to pool in the lower part of the body during high acceleration flight. The heart has a hard time pumping blood to the brain, so our pilots experience gray out, blackout, and even unconsciousness. Further, it's a very tiring experience. We were curious to see if there was a difference in the response between men and women.
The flight centrifuge plays an important role in the research. Female volunteers ride the machine, exposing themselves to gravity pull that may be experienced in the cockpit. The subjects are tested for vision, strength, and endurance. The results are then analyzed against similar male tests.
We're not only looking at the comparison between the two genders, we're also looking at menstrual effects to see, as a woman goes through the standard monthly cycle, if there's a change in the performance.
So I guess the first impression would be, from what we have available, is that it probably won't be a major factor. In my discussions with a number of both Air Force and Navy female pilots that are now training as tactical jet pilots, they have not seen that to be a problem themselves on a personal basis.
Also, women are restricted from the fighter cockpit when pregnancy is confirmed.
The first trimester, usually it's considered that they'll be restricted from flying tactical jet aircraft because of the risk and the liabilities associated with it, both the female pilot and the unborn infant.
Although there are still a few unanswered questions, doctors and scientists have laid one concern to rest. Qualified women are as capable as qualified men in the fighter cockpit. Staff Sergeant Tony Hurst, Air Force News.
Obviously, the physical differences between men and women sparked the most discussions. During an interview on CNN's Larry King Live, Lieutenant Flynn and Lieutenant Colonel Kelly Hamilton were asked how they would cope should they become prisoners of war.
That was a possibility before we went into combat aircraft. As we were seeing in Desert Storm, we did have 2 women POWs, and they obviously were not in combat positions. And as far as what kind of training we have, there's a survival training program that they send all Air Force pilots through to prepare them for if that situation would ever occur.
I fly air refuelers, and certainly if you ever wanted a great target, an air refueler is a target.
I'd say so.
But yes, I received the same training as my male counterparts in prisoner of war training, and basically that's an excellent training that the services give, which readily identifies to you what your fear levels are, what tactics are for escape and evasion, and as far as the fear of being captured, to be honest with you, no, I don't think there's an inherent fear, because even when you're flying missions, you're busy doing what you're doing. That's really kind of way in the back of your mind.
A test pilot takes reality to the edge of science fiction. Aside from the risk, it's also very demanding. Staff Sergeant David Pullen tells of 2 women pilots already flying high-performance aircraft.
Edwards Air Force Base is a zoo of activity, a place where records are broken and the latest aircraft are tested. It's also in the middle of the Mojave Desert that you'll find fighter pilots. No surprise here, except that some of these pilots are female. Female fighter pilots are nothing new to the military. At Edwards Flight Test Center, women have been flying high-performance aircraft for years. Take, for example, Captain Pamela Melroy, a graduate of the Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards. She's logged flying time in a number of jet fighters, to include the F-4, the F-16, and the F-18. She says her experience with flying fighters shows no disparity with her male counterparts.
In fact, it's quite interesting because women fly heavy aircraft now, which often require much heavier stick and yoke forces than a fighter would. And so fighters are not a problem in terms of handling at all.
If there's a person with enough experience to know what a woman goes through in the cockpit of a jet fighter, it's got to be Lieutenant Colonel Connie Engel. In 1977, she was in the first class of women pilots to graduate from undergraduate pilot training. In the 16 years since, she's logged time in fighter aircraft to include the F-4, the F-15 and 16, and the F-111. She's now a chase pilot flying the T-38, pulling 4 to 6 Gs on an average day.
It takes a lot of stamina when you go up and pull a lot of Gs and you're doing a lot of fighter maneuvering, which we do in our training programs here at Edwards. And you come back really tired, but the guys come back really tired too. And I think that just from my experience, seeing women do this is not much different than seeing men do this.
It seems that with today's aircraft and training, the physiological effects play no part in whether or not the pilot is female. And until the day comes when women find themselves in real dogfights, will we really know what all the fuss was about? From the Flight Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base, Staff Sergeant David Pullen, Air Force News.
Stay with us as we continue our special on Women in Combat.
All of our squadrons are manned by volunteers. They always have been for the 35-plus years I've been in the Air Force. So I expect that the women who find their way into our combat squadrons will be volunteers, just like the men are volunteers.
And we know from Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield, that women stand up to the most demanding environments. So we're acting on what we know.
The major command with perhaps the most interest in the new policy has to be Air Combat Command. The commander of ACC, General Michael Lowe, told Air Force News his command will take the lead in creating an environment in which women can successfully compete.
And I welcome it, and I welcome the women pilots that will be flying our fighters and bombers in Air Combat Command in the future, because I think they will do well. And I don't have any problem whatsoever with having women pilots and men pilots in the same squadron. We have them today in the Air Force. We have women in all other specialties. We have women crew chiefs. We have women communication people in our same squadrons. They do well. I'm not the least bit concerned about how they're going to be able to integrate well in our fighter and bomber squadrons, and I welcome them.
Questions and speculation abound concerning the Air Force's integration of women into the previously male-only combat career fields. Subjects range from assignment policies to unit morale. Tech Sergeant Phil Woodney reports.
You can hear it in almost every fighter squadron. They'll have to let them pass, meaning that many male pilots expect that women fighter students will receive preferential treatment. According to Lieutenant General Billy Bowles, that's not the case.
I do not envision an instructor pilot in F-16s or F-15s or any aircraft lowering the standards for anyone, because remember, that student 2 years from now can be flying wing or lead for that instructor pilot, and that instructor pilot knows that and is not about to sacrifice the safety of a pilot, the aircraft, and the mission of that unit to get someone through because of a particular gender issue.
Another worry is that assigning a woman to a combat cockpit will delay a banked male pilot from getting an aircraft.
It'll be almost a minimal impact. As I mentioned, we're talking about eight pilots who will be phased in as training slots become available. 7 into fighters and then 1 into a special ops type aircraft. Now, those 7, neither of those 7 displaced an individual who had a training slot. They were slipped into available they will be slipped into available training slots based on the timing that they would have been scheduled for training had they been able to take that training when they graduated from UPT.
The issue of which career fields will open to women is a popular topic as well. Although the Air Force is examining all career fields to determine which can be open to women, current thinking is that jobs which hold the potential for offensive ground combat will probably remain closed. From Washington, Tech Sergeant Phil Woodney, Air Force News.
We have to go back to when that assignment system started, and we have to look at what was available, where they graduated in their class, and then we have to contact the woman pilot, wherever she is now, and say, you graduated 4th in your class, that was in the top 10%. There was a fighter assignment available on that day. How do you feel? You want to go to fighters? We'll offer you that opportunity. So we have a problem of going back a couple years, a little more than that, and offering this opportunity to women who were that good. What we don't want to, what I didn't want to do was pick Jeannie here, a symbolic woman pilot, and start her down the road and declare victory on this, say, we did it. We wanted to jump into this with enough momentum that we really made a commitment to it.
In order to find out how the policy change will affect training, we went straight to Air Training Command headquarters. Staff Sergeant Trish Freeland files our next report from Randolph Air Force Base.
It's business as usual for the Air Training Command. ATC has always had women integrated into its system, so no immediate changes are expected.
Right now, we have female pilots as instructors, as students, as maintenance officers, and people like that all around in various capacities. We're working fine.
Women, just as men, are selected for combat aircraft training based on their qualifications, so quotas are out of the question.
Definitely no quotas. No quotas for anybody of any kind of majority or minority. And as such, we're just going to press on, and I guess the buzzword nowadays is gender neutral. Everything's gender neutral, and that's the way it ought to be.
Air Training Command won't see any gender-specific changes due to the lifting of the ban, so for now, ATC plans to continue on its present course of training for both men and women. Reporting from Randolph Air Force Base, Staff Sergeant Trish Freeland, Air Force News.
A principal source for pilots is the Air Force Academy in Colorado. With the lifting of the exclusion came a broader selection of career opportunities for the Academy's women cadets. Staff Sergeant Eric Brazones has details.
This year, the Air Force Academy is sending 225 of its graduates to undergraduate pilot training. 13 of those 225 UPT slots belong to women, who, for the first time, have the chance to go as far as their talent will take them. While the decision allowing women in combat has met with mixed reactions, Cadet Amy Santmeyer, who was selected for UPT, expresses a common feeling among the females in the cadet wing.
I don't expect any favors. I don't want any favors. I want to stand on my own merits. If I can do the job, I deserve the shot. if I can't do the job, someone else needs to have that chance.
Having that chance to prove their abilities is an important step in achieving total equality in the military workplace. The Academy's Commandant of Cadets, Brigadier General Richard C. Bethurum, agrees.
It's not a matter of man versus woman. It's a matter of can you accomplish the task at hand through the training programs that we have, which are very rigorous. And I'm confident that women will be able to do that.
General Bethurum went on to say that the selection criteria for undergraduate pilot training at the Academy is gender neutral. This ensures that the most qualified individuals are sent forward from this institution. Reporting from the United States Air Force Academy, I'm Staff Sergeant Eric Brazones, Air Force News.
Details still to come on women flying over the dangerous skies of Bosnia as our special edition of Air Force Television News continues.
I think that it's real important that we have the best possible Air Force, and opening combat aircraft to women is going to increase the pool of resources available.
I know it's going to be tough for them, the first few women, but I know that they can do it because I've met some of them and I know just how good they are, and they wouldn't be where they're at right now if it wasn't for the fact that they can fly those airplanes.
Over 400 women pilots and navigators are presently on active duty. Of those, a handful are flying airdrop missions into Bosnia. Sergeant Daniela Marcus recently flew on one such mission and spoke with Captain Linda Torrens and her crew.
There were 3 women in this crew: the aircraft commander, a satellite communications operator, and a loadmaster. All Provide Promise veterans. They make up almost half of the women involved in Operation Provide Promise. The announcement allowing women to fly in combat aircraft turned a lot of eyes in their direction, but it didn't take long before all that attention became more of a nuisance than a thrill.
Mainly for the guys in the squadron, because they're doing the same thing I'm doing. And how come you want to talk to me and, you know, the other 6 guys on the crew are sitting in the bus waiting for me?
It's no different for a woman than it is a man. It's a challenge for us just like it is for them.
Traffic, 10 o'clock. After flying several hours, the C-130 entered the drop zone. That's when the loadmasters are under the most pressure. They're responsible for making sure the load safely leaves the plane.
Load clear. Load clear.
This was the 8th airdrop for Senior Airman Martrina Hunter.
The first airdrop, everybody was pretty tense. You know, 'cause we didn't know what to expect. We were kind of nervous, but after that, I mean, you don't get complacent about it because you know something can happen, but you just kind of have to put it in your crew's hands and you all work together.
Captain Linda Torrens has been flying missions in support of Operation Provide Promise since the beginning.
We started flying Sarajevo last July. I've flown 24 missions into Sarajevo. We've now flown 12 airdrop missions over Bosnia. Pretty much is what I've been concentrating on for the last year.
So far, aircraft supporting Operation Provide Promise have delivered nearly 1,700 tons of relief supplies from the air and on the ground to the war-torn region that used to be Yugoslavia. Sergeant Daniela Marcus, Air Force News, in the skies over Bosnia.
Not to be left out, the Pacific has its share of women pilots carrying out vital missions on a daily basis. Tech Sergeant Mike Miller gives us a view from the east.
The mission of a C-130 tactical aircraft is about as varied as they come in the Air Force. Flying combat support missions on both sides of the battle lines, the aircraft and crew can fly into harm's way at any time. Commanding the crew and flying the C-130 requires a pilot with a strong will to succeed. For women on the flight deck, having the right attitude and skills has shown they belong.
It seems like if you can be professional and you can do the job well to the best of your ability and be competitive, then they think of you as a peer, and most of the guys, when you're on the job, tend to forget that you're a woman.
The decisions made from the command seat on a C-130 can affect the life and death of the crew or people on the ground. Making those choices is part training, part experience, and trust in self. Male or female, common experience and knowledge almost guarantee the same decision.
I like to think that I'm being a professional, and I'm first of all an officer, and I'm thinking in that manner, and we seem to have very similar viewpoints on these subjects.
On the flight deck of the C-130, gender is not a factor. The women flyers in the 374th Airlift Wing have proven through actions and attitude they're not any different from their male counterparts. At Yokota Air Base, Japan, I'm Air Force Sergeant Mike Miller, Air Force News.
So with women now filling nearly every career field in the Air Force, there appears to be no limit as to what they can accomplish. A strong desire to succeed seems to be the only prerequisite. The media picked up on this as well and asked General McPeak when he believed a woman would become Chief of Staff.
When do you think women could get your job?
It's going to be at least another day or two, but no, seriously, we have women generals, and they can continue to the top, and they can compete for my job just like men. Now, we're not going to have a program to make sure that my successor is a woman, because this is not an affirmative action program. This is an action to allow women to compete on level terms with men. And you know, when we have a woman who is lucky enough to be Chief of Staff, that's when we'll have one.
And that'll put an end to this special edition of Air Force Television News.
We'd love to hear your comments or suggestions. Write us at Headquarters AF News, IIOE, 1015 Billy Mitchell Road, Kelly Air Force Base, Texas, 78241-5601. I'm Master Sergeant Jim Langdon.
And I'm Staff Sergeant Chris Beckwith. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next month.
60 years ago this month, 2 women left a dinner party at the White House, sped to National Airport still wearing their evening dresses, borrowed a plane, and took off to tour the nation's capital at night. The pilot was Amelia Earhart, her passenger, Eleanor Roosevelt. Miss Earhart, of course, went on to set numerous aviation records and led the way for thousands of women flyers down to the present day. Today, these officers have the opportunity to become aviation pioneers.
Well, I knew the limit was there when I joined, so it wasn't anything I didn't expect. And I appreciate now the opportunity to pursue flying a fighter, which is what I wanted to do before. There's always limits placed on you no matter where you go, I think, in the corporate world or anywhere. And now those limits are going to be based on our own ability, and that's going to be a welcome change.
For the most part, if you do your job and you do it well, you're going to be respected. And that's just the experience that I've had.
990 Tower Control, you're cleared for takeoff.
Tower Control, it's 990, cleared for takeoff.